Hello and welcome to the HistoryNetwork.org podcast. If you'd like to become a patron of the podcast, we would love you to. And you can do so at patreon.com/the History Network. Thanks to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. The HistoryNetwork.org podcast, season 35, episode 10. Heroics on the Edge of Passchendaele, the New Zealand Division and the Capture of Basseville, July 1917. This episode was written by Murray Darm. Murray is an ancient and medieval military historian from New Zealand living in Australia. He has written more than 100 articles on various aspects of ancient and medieval military history, as well as other historical topics from all periods, ranging from the history of opera to the runic alphabet and recipients of the Victoria Cross. He is the author of Macedonian Phalangite versus Persian Warrior, Athenian Hoplite versus Spartan Hoplite, and Leuctra 371 BC, all from Osprey Publishing. He is, of course, a regular writer on here and a regular on the Ancient Warfare podcast. In the early stages of the battle aimed at capturing the high ground east and south of Ypres, the men of the New Zealand Division were tasked with capturing the village of Basseville, southwest of the Messines Ridge, where the division had fought in June. Basseville was situated on the Lys River, the border with France, and on the extreme right of Haig's grand offensive. The New Zealanders' attack would act as a distraction to the German forces and hopefully cause them to divert troops away from the centre of Haig's main attack. Germans were under instructions that Warneton, an important rail hub just north of Basseville, and with it Basseville, must be held. The first attempt to take Basseville was launched on June 13th, but was repulsed, as was a second attempt the next day. A third attempt was made on June 22nd, but it too was repulsed, as was the fourth attempt on the 23rd. The New Zealanders then retired to recoup after a month of unsuccessful fighting. They returned to the same front line in mid-July. They were now expected to take Basseville and Pont Rouge to the south, actions to suggest an attempt was coming to capture Lille. The Kiwis prepared to go in as planned, unaware, due to poor communications, that the remainder of the offensive had been delayed by 2 days. This large operation was the French-led Battle of Pilkem Ridge. The Kiwis captured the village on the 27th of July and did not expect a German counterattack during daylight hours. They therefore withdrew most of their men from the village. At 5 a.m., a little more than an hour after sunrise, however, the Germans did counterattack and retook the village. They then mounted further attacks on the New Zealand lines with bombardment and flamethrowers. New Zealand reinforcements were called up, consisting of 336 men and officers of the 2nd Battalion, Wellington Infantry Regiment. They were tasked with retaking Basseville. The attack was planned for July 29th, but this was delayed by 2 days, so the attack went in on July 31st. The ground was studded with wire and machine gun emplacements. The most dominant defensive position was a machine gun nest located on the 2nd floor of a 2-story building at the northern end of the village, in Den Rooster Cabaret. The task of capturing this was given to 2 sections of the 2nd Wellingtons, 15 men in total, commanded by Corporal Leslie Les Andrew. Born in the Wanganui region of New Zealand's North Island, Andrew attended one of the country's most prestigious schools, Wanganui Collegiate. He had been a sergeant in the Cadets and Territorials and volunteered into the New Zealand Expeditionary Force in October 1915, shipping out to Egypt in May 1916. He put his age down as 20 to ensure he would be accepted, even though he was already 18. When he shipped out, he reverted to private in order to join B Company of the 2nd Battalion, Wellington Infantry Regiment. The regiment sailed for England in July. By August, he was serving on the Somme, where he was wounded in September. He returned to the front, and in January 1917 he was promoted corporal, and he then participated in the Battle of Messines in June 1917. Andrew was instructed to advance separately from the main attack in order to neutralize the threat of the machine gun nest. A creeping barrage would provide cover, and Andrew and his men were to follow closely behind it. The main attack, supported by mortar and machine gun fire, went in at 3:50 a.m. sunrise, and immediately became suppressed by another machine gun nest hidden in a fence line, which opened up on the front platoon. From his position in support of the main assault, Andrew realized that if the attack was to succeed, he would need to take out the new machine gun nest first, before advancing on his original objective. While the leading platoon took shelter, Andrew, seeing this new threat, diverted his party and charged the second machine gun emplacement from the flank, killing the crew and capturing the gun. Confusion arises at this point in records of the battle. According to war correspondent Malcolm Ross, 11 of Andrew's 15 team were wounded or killed in this initial action. Andrew then continued the original mission himself with 3 remaining men, rushing to catch up with the creeping barrage. The regimental diarist, however, does not record any casualties in Andrew's section, nor does the official historian of the campaign. Another account gives credit to Lieutenant Bliss, leading the foremost platoon of the main attack, for capturing the first machine gun, while another account gives all the credit to Corporal Andrew. Having taken out the first machine gun nest, Andrew then continued on to his original mission of taking out the machine gun in the 2-story building, but discovered that a frontal assault would be pointless. Malcolm Ross reports that, coolly sizing up the situation, he led his little party round for a quarter of a mile on their stomachs through some thistles and attacked the German position from the rear. Ross's account continues, as soon as they got close enough, the intrepid quartet threw bombs at the crew and rushed, killed 4 of the enemy and put the rest to flight, and captured the gun and the position. All remaining members of the party were slightly wounded during the operation, according to Ross. Although the London Gazette entry for his gallantry ends there, Ross records that Corporal Andrew continued to press his attack, capturing yet another machine gun, and even going forward from there to reconnoitre the German positions. Andrew would be awarded the Victoria Cross for his actions, and the London Gazette also gives the credit for taking out the first machine gun to Andrew, although it too gives no account of his group sustaining any casualties. Andrew, at the age of only 20, was the youngest of New Zealand's 16 Victoria Cross recipients from the First World War. His Gazette entry stated he displayed great skill and determination in his disposition, finally capturing the post, killing several of the enemy, and putting the remainder to flight. And Corporal Andrew's conduct throughout was unexampled for cool daring, initiative, and fine leadership, and his magnificent example was a great stimulant to his comrades. His commanding officer, Major William Cunningham, commanding officer, Wellington Infantry Battalion, was particularly pleased that it will be a Wanganui boy to earn the coveted distinction. The assault to retake Basseville had been a brilliant success, and had lasted little over half an hour. It was called one of the most brilliant minor operations which the division executed. Andrew's further actions may have alerted the New Zealanders to a German counter-attack at 5 a.m., which was thwarted by a well-directed artillery barrage. Other German assaults attempting to retake the town were to follow, and at the end of the day the 2nd Wellingtons had suffered 40% casualties, 134 out of the 336 who went in, with 37 killed. Many years later, Andrew recounted that he personally had killed 8 enemy soldiers that day, 6 with bayonet. The actions of the 2nd Wellingtons that day garnered 14 military medals, 3 Distinguished Conduct Medals, 4 military crosses, and Andrew's Victoria Cross. One of the machine guns captured by Andrew, it is unclear which, was sent back to New Zealand as a trophy. It is housed today in the Wanganui Museum. The following day, August 1st, Andrew was promoted sergeant, and talk of his heroic conduct became widespread. His action was gazetted on September 4th, and he was invested with his Victoria Cross at Buckingham Palace on October 31st that year. Andrew was then sent for officer training and was commissioned as a 2nd lieutenant in March 1918. He was training members of the NZEF in Britain when the war ended. Meanwhile, the Third Battle of Ypres had proven costly to the New Zealand forces. The Germans had never been deceived by the feint towards Lille, and they put up stiff resistance. During the fighting on October 12th alone, the Allies suffered 13,000 casualties. Of those, 2,735 were New Zealanders, including 845 dead. It was one of the worst days in New Zealand military history. Nonetheless, the New Zealanders kept fighting and were involved in further attacks until December. Andrew remained in the army following the armistice and took up a post in the small New Zealand Permanent Army. He was promoted captain by the age of 27 and served in India, attached to the 2nd Highland Light Infantry, and commanded the New Zealand contingent at the coronation of George VI in 1937. He was a major when World War II broke out, and he joined the 2nd New Zealand Expeditionary Force as a lieutenant colonel in January 1940. He had a reputation as a disciplinarian, which some men under his command appreciated, though others did not. Another New Zealand Victoria Cross recipient, Keith Elliott, appreciated that Andrew wanted his men to be prepared, and so trained them rigorously. His nickname among the New Zealanders was Old February. Andrew took command of the 22nd Wellington Battalion, which served in Britain in 1940 and subsequently in Greece, Crete, and in North Africa. Evacuated from Greece on April 25, 1941, Andrew commanded his men in the defence of Malim airfield on Crete in May. His position was Point 107, the hill which dominated the airfield. When the German attacks began on May 20th, he later recalled that the barrages his men were subjected to were worse than what he had experienced at Passchendaele, Messines, and the Somme. He called those First World War barrages mere picnics in comparison. Andrew requested assistance from the 23rd Battalion, but was left without any support for 24 hours, after which he reluctantly withdrew his men, since he risked being overrun. The Germans took Point 107, and the airfield fell to them soon after. For his withdrawal, Andrew was blamed for the loss of Crete, and he never again held an operational command, although he remained in command of the 22nd Battalion. Andrew's role in the loss of Crete remains controversial, however, and others blame the commander of the 23rd Battalion, Brigadier James Hargest, for refusing to give the requested support. Other officers of the 5th New Zealand Brigade must also share the blame. There was an inquiry into the loss of Crete, at which both Andrew and Hargest gave evidence, but no conclusive finding was made. The commander of New Zealand forces on Crete, Major General Bernard Freyberg, did not place any blame on Andrew. Evacuated to North Africa, Andrew again showed his qualities during Operation Crusader in November and December 1941, when, after the headquarters had been overrun and the officers captured, He commanded the remnants of the 5th New Zealand Brigade for 14 days at Monastir and Bardia. Brigadier Hargist was captured on November 27th, and Andrew took command, fighting at the southeast end of the corridor to Tobruk against the Afrika Korps. During that time, the brigade saw off repeated attacks by the 21st Panzer Division. Andrew was mentioned in dispatches and later awarded a Distinguished Service Order. He relinquished command on December 7th, after Erwin Rommel had abandoned Tobruk on December 5th. In February 1942, Andrew relinquished command of the 22nd Battalion and returned to New Zealand to oversee preparations for a potential Japanese invasion at Fortress Area Wellington. He resumed service with the regular New Zealand Army in October 1943 and was promoted colonel. After the war, he was promoted to brigadier. He used to quip that he had held every rank from private to brigadier, with the exception of quartermaster sergeant. He was appointed ADC to the Governor-General of New Zealand in 1946. After retirement in 1952, Andrew resisted calls to stand as a politician. He had married his wife Bessie on November 12, 1918, the day after the armistice, and they had 5 children and lived in Levin in New Zealand when he died in 1969. 3 Victoria Cross recipients attended his funeral. In December 2007, a worker at the National Army Museum, Waiouru, New Zealand, stole 96 medals, including 9 Victoria Crosses, awarded 2 New Zealand recipients, including Andrews as well as Charles Upham's Victoria Cross and Bar. The crime created an international outcry and was dubbed a crime against the nation. At that time, a total of 24 Victoria Crosses had been stolen, and only 1, a Canadian award, had been recovered, and that 31 years after its theft. A huge international effort to recover the New Zealand medals was launched. A reward was posted by Lord Michael Ashcroft and a New Zealand businessman, and subsequently all of the 96 medals were recovered in February 2008, but the culprits remained at large. The smash and grab theft had only taken 4 minutes, and so more than one perpetrator was sought. 1 man was apprehended and pleaded guilty in September 2009, while another man remained at large until August 2011. Andrew's Victoria Cross is now once again on, much more secure, display in the National Army Museum, Waiouru. And there we are, at the end of season 35. We will be back pretty soon with season 36. Thanks once again, Murray, for writing that episode for us. If you'd like to have a go at writing an episode for us, or you want to contact us and give us an idea for a subject that you think we've not covered yet, then just drop us a line, info@thehistorynetwork.org for that. And once again, please do consider becoming a patron of the podcast at patreon.com/thehistorynetwork. Once again, thank you to all our patrons who make this podcast possible. Thanks again for listening. You've been listening to the historynetwork.org podcast, written by Murray Darm, read by Nick Barker.